Question 5. If I could mention on my podcast how I narrowed down the whole market to the relatively few stocks which I actually investigate well enough to invest in, and a related question is, how do I assess the validity of a company or industry story? So this is a great question because there's so much information out there, but a lot of it is not available to retail investors. Institutional investors are flooded with information, emails, Bloomberg, etc. However, business TV news shows like CNBC and good quality podcasts, like this one, and blogs do offer a lot of very good information. So my answer of how to pick stocks is connected to how to parse through what ends up being too much information for everybody. So here's how I think about it. In short, I'm a story guy. I am always looking for stories. And I think most investors are too. If I can conceptualize a company as part of some good story, I'm interested. Now, a good story requires both macro and micro strengths. The company needs to be part of a growing industry sector, have good management, be well positioned to grow, or to take market share and have liquidity in the stock price so you can own it. Quarterly conference calls are a great way to do a progress check. I listen to the management and I ask myself, are they equivocating, hesitating, pausing, reversing course? Also, price alone is not a motivator. I like a cheap stock as much as anybody, but I never, ever, ever buy a cheap-looking stock just because it looks cheap. If there is no story, I just assume it could stay cheap forever. So where do I find stories? I look everywhere. Now, institutional investors get hundreds of sell-side research reports a day. That's their daily newspaper. Now, retail investors also have access to a lot of good quality information. Usually, there is nothing important out there, but once in a while, a golden nugget emerges, and that's when I start researching. Most of the information is just white noise. One thing I always look for are companies that sell proprietary products or have real market power. For example, I own Moody's because Moody's and S&P run a duopoly and therefore have pricing power. Similarly, I own Visa because Visa and MasterCard are also a duopoly and they also have pricing power. Now, the macro story I am pursuing the most, like everybody else these days, is AI and all of its tentacles, of which there are many. Now, let me just turn to a related topic. While I believe a great CEO is necessary, I am generally not someone who listens to a CEO and accepts everything they say. I assume even the best CEOs are always trying to spin me. That's why I do my own work. And when I'm doing my own work, once I identify a story that I like, I look for outside sources to confirm it. So, for example, I look for periodicals that specialize in sectors, and I read them. And then with all that information, I get the ability to parse out the truth. Take, for example, the subprime crisis. My fundamental research told me that underwriting standards were deteriorating, but it was anecdotal. The industry, of course, said all was good. But Moody's allowed you to subscribe to their massive securitization database for a fee. And I was only too happy to pay that fee. And that database over time confirmed our thesis about subprime. The numbers did not lie, even though the rating agencies took tremendous financial incentives to rate subprime mortgages as good paper. In other words, they took what was really junk and rated it well, but their own database belied their own ratings. Question 6. I'm 45 years old, married with 2 children, and I recently experienced a financial loss, and he gives the amount. I won't say what it is, but it's a significant amount for my family. My question is, how do you personally deal with the emotional weight of financial loss? And more importantly, what would you suggest someone like me could do to recover gradually over, say, 5 years with low to medium risk? So first of all, I'm sorry for your financial loss. I can empathize. In my career, I have had plenty of setbacks, and some of them financial as well. We all make mistakes, And I'm sure you've dwelled on this mistake endlessly. Believe me, I know, because I've done the same. But at some point, you just have to set it aside because otherwise you won't be able to make a rational decision. Now, I address your question at great length in my financial literacy lecture that drops in a few weeks. But right now, I'll give you a good preview. So I'm not a bond guy. I believe in investing in stocks, and specifically stocks in the US. And given your financial situation, I would not advise you to invest in individual stocks. Not yet anyway, not till you recover. I would buy the S&P 500 index. The symbol is SPY, S-P-Y. And if you want a bit more risk, you could buy some of the NASDAQ index, whose symbol is QQQ, the triple Qs. I would invest right now with what you can, no matter how small. And over time, as you save some money, I would add to those positions over time, but only the money that you can afford, and keep doing that. Don't try to time the market. When the savings become available, just do it. That will take the emotion out of it. Now, my confidence in this strategy is that the U.S. economy has never been more dynamic than any time in my lifetime. The infotech sector is over 30% of the S&P 500 index. But if you add in companies that are not technically part of infotech, but are really tech-like, like Amazon, Google, Meta, it's a long list, you get to around 50%. Now, in my view, tech is where the story is at, and no country in the world has such a high percentage in tech. That is why I would just stick to the U.S. and U.S. stocks. Best of luck to you and your family. Question 8. Berkshire is holding $348 billion in cash. It's a lot of money. And I'm aware of successful value investors holding 30% in cash when markets are frothy. What are your thoughts on holding cash in general, and especially now as markets are at record highs? That is a very intriguing question, and I've actually changed my mind about it. 10 years ago, I was not as confident in the U.S. economy as I am now. So when the market would have a correction, I'd get nervous and raise some cash. But I learned the hard way that it is very difficult psychologically to get back in. You've just sold, and then the market turns. Is it a fake out or is it real? You torture yourself. You literally torture yourself. And in my case, I was always late to add back to investments. My opinion today is that because the U.S. economy is so dynamic, it's best for most people to just stay fully invested. That is what I have done for several years. Now, it's not for everybody. Some people like to always have cash on the sidelines, and if that makes you more comfortable to invest for the long term, then that's fine too. I want to add one personal investment preference about why I don't invest overseas. This is very personal. In my hedge fund days, we invested in the United States, Europe, China, India, Japan. The portfolio traded pretty much 24/7. And oftentimes, I would wake up at night, usually at around 3 in the morning, and I would have this unbearable desire to open up my computer and look to see how the performance was at 3 in the morning. And it wouldn't matter if the performance was good or the performance was bad. I never could go back to sleep. Now, I was a lot younger back then, but my message is never underestimate the importance of a good night's sleep. Investing is a passion and an occupation, but if it becomes a preoccupation, it's time to tweak your style. There is no need to be a hero, and certainly not a 24/7 global hero. My advice is choose the lane that works for you and be the best you can at it.